I love the Muppets.
I love the Muppets too. You're not special.
But I always feel like I'm left wondering how they came to be.
Well, when a daddy Muppet and a mommy Muppet love each other very much.
The Muppets are actually creatures of chaos that's slowly trying to mimic themselves into our society, masking as entertainers so we don't realise what's happening until it's too late.
Now, Datchia, I have seen you at several Star Kid premieres, so I know you're gonna know this reference. Under your theory, the Muppets are what Professor Higgins sees an apotheosis as, right? The Muppets preach, for the most part, peace and love and care, right? Now, of course, there's the outliers.
Miss Piggy.
But, there's even if this theory is true, you're presenting it in a scary way when it is kind of a good thing, I would assume. I think the more Muppets, the better.
Now, if that sounds crazy to you, you're probably right. It does sound crazy, but I promise you it makes sense.
Trust me, it doesn't. I've watched this twice. 3 times, actually.
And if I can convince you by the end of this video, you'll never look at the Muppets the same way again. But before we do that, please do subscribe. I really want to hit 400k soon, and we get closer and closer to that milestone each day.
I agree. Subscribe to me, subscribe to Datchia, subscribe to the Muppets, and Sesame Street YouTube channels in the information card. Right over there, I think?
I believe that there are 3 clear categories of Muppet that they can fit into, with the one exception being Gonzo, who is canonically an alien. We can rule them out as an outlier due to that being the situation.
Actually, Muppets from Space is not considered canon, by most Muppet fans, as well as several Muppeteers, and it also doesn't ever come up, unlike other Muppet movies, which are constantly referenced. So I would assume that it is, in fact, not canon. However, it is a very good movie, so I do recommend watching it. Gonzo is not an alien. Gonzo is whatever. He doesn't fit into these categories because he is whatever. And yeah, where does he come from? We don't know. Nobody gives a shit. We love him. We love Gonzo. And he does use he, him pronouns. So, not they, them pronouns. While he is non-binary, he, uses he, him pronouns because pronouns are not equal gender. And, also, I like to headcanon him as a he, him lesbian specifically. Just because it seems like a Gonzo thing to say. I'm a he, him lesbian. That seems like Gonzo to me. He only ever dates women or chicken, I guess. One might say there's not one rooster in his roster.
Now, the first category you have is monsters. These are your fuzzy creatures that don't exactly resemble anything of note. They're not based on anything, and they're just fluffy characters. After that, you have the animals, the animal-based Muppets, that carry a lot of the same features as those animals and are even referred to as those animals, but are very clearly not those animals. You might think that characters like Big Bird and Sweetums would go into the same category, but you'd be wrong. Big Bird is very much fitting into the animal category and Sweetums into the monster, despite both being big body style Muppets. Surprisingly, the type of Muppet doesn't really affect the category they go into, so
well, yeah, obviously, different species of animals are different sizes, so of course some of them are going to be represented by different types of Muppets.
that's something to keep in mind. The final category you have is your humans, or your human-like Muppets.
Well, Scooter is a human-like Muppet. He's also referred to as a gopher, and, and that actually refers to his job. But he's never actually defined as a human. He doesn't even look that much like a human, so I wouldn't, put him as, the cookie-cutter example of a human-type Muppet. If anything, the cookie-cutter example would be his uncle, right? Who is also very rich.
They often try pass off with having more human features. These are the types of characters that don't tend to be as wacky as the other Muppets and follow more human traits, like wearing clothes or doing regular jobs.
These are things that all Muppets do, actually. This doesn't only fit into the human Muppet category, right? So, Kermit, for example, is less wacky than other Muppets, right? Miss Piggy and Fozzie wear clothes. And they all have regular jobs. They're all performers. Right? So, yeah, this isn't really something exclusive to humanoid Muppets.
These 3 categories make up most of the Muppets.
Actually, you're forgetting about the Kuzbanians. A lot of the characters from Fraggle Rock, which are, a completely made-up species, neither monster, nor animal, nor human, object Muppets, right? There's a lot of object Muppets. There's fruit Muppets. Kermit specifically says that anything can be a Muppet, pointing to a hat rack that is, very curiously, has no mouth or eyes, and, it's literally just a normal hat rack. It's not made of felt or anything. Like, there's nothing Muppety about it, but it's still canonically a Muppet, right? So actually, none of these traits define a Muppet, nor are these actual categories of Muppets. The only categories. These are categories of Muppets. This is a way to categorize them.
To my audience of what he more resembles, and you guys said monster.
Datchia, you have not built an audience of Muppet fans, of devout Muppet fans, right? Your audience is not to be trusted with this. They don't even know these categories of Muppet. They don't even know what a Muppet monster is. So, yeah, don't ask them. Why the fuck are you asking them? Ask like a forum. There's like a lot of Muppet forums. There's like Muppet Central, right? There's a Muppet Central forum, Muppet Central Discord, Tough Pigs forum, Tough Pigs Discord. I've been banned from at least one of those. Yeah, there's a lot of shit.
Which is really interesting considering he carries at least one trait from each category of Muppet, but all in all, he does resemble a monster. And when you start thinking about it, the category of Muppet goes way further than just the traits they have, but also the roles they take on and the way they're treated for it. And when you think about it, you might suspect the animal Muppets to be the most respected.
One would only assume that if they've never watched the Muppets, which seems to be a correct assessment of your audience.
The fact that that's where you get all your main Muppets. Your Kermits, your Miss Piggies, your Fozzie Bears. But the truth of the matter is that they only seem to mesh in this world within the entertainment industry.
The entertainment industry and the butchers.
Kermit has time and time again been shown to be the underfrog. Muppets are a success story, not the norm. And the entertainment they show tends to be more outlandish and insane. Whereas when you look at Sesame Street duo Bert and Ernie, they also deal with comical scenarios. Theirs is much more grounded and based in reality. The difference there is that Bert and Ernie are much more human-shaped than the other Muppets. Even one of the major things about the Muppet Show is the older human-like Muppets, Statler and Waldorf, who are constantly berating the show, despite the fact that they're a part of it.
They're not. The Muppet Show is a stage show, which Statler and Waldorf view. They watch it. They're not part of the Muppet Show. They're part of the Muppet Show on TV, which is probably an in-universe documentary, if we're assuming there's any canonicity or continuity to this. But they're not part of the show happening on stage, except for when they do take part in it, which is rare.
They can't help but try and seem disconnected from the other Muppets. It definitely looks like the human-shaped Muppets are more respected than any other Muppet.
So, just a comment on, you keep saying human-shaped, the word is humanoid. Human-shaped, they're not human-shaped at all. They're very puppet-shaped. They're kind of hand-shaped, if you think about it. They're not human-shaped. They're humanoid. They resemble humans to some degree because of their skin color, because of the way they behave, because of their eyes, because they don't resemble anything else. But they're not human-shaped.
So when you think about the actual Muppet species as a whole...
The Muppets are not a species. If we're talking biologically, they're more likely to be a genus or even a kingdom of their own. Because, we have several Muppet species, right? We know that Snuffleupagus is a Snuffleupagus. That is, his biological species, right? We have the species of a lot of Muppets. They're not their own species. They're not every Muppet is the same species. They're more likely, again, a genus or something higher up in the way we categorize animals.
Is it possible that this is a case of mimicry? The idea that Muppets are trying to ingrain themselves in our society alongside people by mimicking what's familiar?
So, yes, it is possible, but I don't think it would be a conscious attempt, would it? Because, well, if it was, they're very bad at it. I believe it could be a case of biological mimicry, in which case they simply evolved to look like other things that they aren't.
I mean, even when you listen to the theme song, you can hear it. It's time to put on makeup, it's time to dress up right. These are things that people do, not animals, not monsters, people. If we think back to our original naming system, the characters that are labelled as monsters are the ones with the most puppet-esque traits. Primarily being covered in hair and large mouths, they tend to have the most basic elements. The only time we really see monsters front and centre is in shows like Sesame Street. And within the greater Muppet lore, that's not really a show, but more of an actual street that Muppets and people live on.
No, it's both. The Muppet lore. It's like an in-universe documentary. It's canonically like an educational TV show as well as, an actual street.
They are purposely kept out of the spotlight. And even then, the monsters we do see are still mimicking. Just not people or animals, but thoughts and feelings. Cookie Monster is the most obvious, an obsession for cookies to the point where it's all he can think about.
There are entire episodes where Cookie Monster thinks about things that aren't cookies. Like there's a whole episode where he's like, cookies are my favorite food, but I love vegetables. It's like, and he sings like a whole like sad ballad about it, right? Like people are like, hey, you're Veggie Monster because I saw you eat a vegetable, and he's like, no, I like vegetables, but I like cookies. I'm Cookie Monster, but I like other things. I'm allowed to like other things and still be Cookie Monster. So no, that's just false. That's Flanderization based on his name. That's actually Muppet racist. That's Muppetphobic of you.
Elmo is the same with friendship.
No, he's not. Oh, he's like a 3-year-old boy. Of course he's gonna like having friends. But like he has like the whole Elmo's World bit, which is pretty much just him talking to the camera, right? There's like he has a lot of interests. Elmo is Elmo. He doesn't have an obsession with friendship. He has friends, Datchia. Also, they're 3 years old. Of course they're not gonna, have, Elmo is specifically, he's 3 years old, right? A lot of the Muppets are designed to act like children in Sesame Street. Of course they're gonna have simple personalities. Children don't really explore themselves until way later on.
It actually seems like you can tie a lot of the monsters with an obsession.
This entire video is pretty much just Datchia. Sup, I'm here now. The entire video is pretty much just Datchia pointing out neurodivergent traits in Muppets, and then going, "Oh, that's weird. They must be aliens." Not mentioning how neurodivergent traits. A lot of comedic characters will have neurodivergent traits because sadly the neurotypicals find us think we're clowns. Second, the Muppets themselves are written by people who like puppetry. That's not a very neurotypical interest, Datchia. Right? I know, speculating about people's, neurodivergency status isn't, the best thing to do, but, come on. Do you really... what's more likely, right?
The monsters on Sesame Street are constantly surrounded by people. It would make sense that they would be listening out for what people say and decide to lock in on that.
You know who else does this, Datchia? Children. Children will often imitate the adults around them. You know who else does this, Datchia? Neurodivergence. That's a whole thing that we do. We mask. It's called masking. When you listen out for what people say, and you try to imitate that to sound normal, that's called masking.
In the Muppet movie, Walter was raised like a person, despite clearly being a Muppet. Walter talks about how he was raised with his brother Gary, though we never get explicitly told whether they're related or adopted.
They left it vague because you're not supposed to overthink it, Datchia. It's pretty clear that he is adopted. You could make, arguments for, I don't know, it's a mutation or some shit. Or a metaphor for disability, that also works. But, overall, it doesn't matter. It's not part of the plot. You can infer what you want, and most people will infer that he's adopted.
But Walter is pretty adamant that they look like they could be twins, despite having some very clear differences between them. Remember that, and let me tell you something about medieval folklore, specifically the concept of changelings. It's the idea that some kind of mythical creature would sneak into your house in the middle of the night and replace your children, commonly when they're babies or infants, and swap them out with one of their own. The changeling child would look identical to the human one, except for the fact that as they got older, they wouldn't grow. They'd look sickly, and they'd seem wise beyond their years, often struggling to fit in with the people in their age group. In today's day and age, we'd understand that the reason these tales were so widespread is because parents would see their disabled or neurodivergent children and assume it would have to be the work of magical creatures.
Datchia points this out, but doesn't see how this might tie into the Muppets.
But in the context of the Muppet lore, it gives a pretty sound explanation for what the Muppets are.
It's not very sound, Datchia. It kind of goes against like everything we're told ever.
Walter could part off pretty well as Gary's brother.
No, he couldn't! Look at that picture! Does he look like he could part off pretty well as Gary's brother? No, it fucking doesn't, Datchia. Because he couldn't. Walter doesn't see that he's different. Walter doesn't notice it. He notices that he has difficulties, but he doesn't know that he's different. That's like the point of the movie, Datchia. Nobody else thinks Walter looks like Gary. Nobody. That's like in the movie.
Until they got older and Walter doesn't grow. He doesn't fit in with the others, and his obsession with the Muppets is him finding a connection towards his people without realising.
His connection with the Muppets mirrors how a lot of neurodivergent people connect to the Muppets for the same reasons you pointed out, that they're weird and changelings. The Muppets accept everyone. The Muppets don't want you to fit in. That's why we like them, Datchia. And that's why Walter likes them. Because he doesn't fit in. Walter is an audience stand-in. You know that, right?
In fact, a common practice that was meant to be done if you found out your child was a changeling is abandoning them in the middle of nowhere, like a forest or a swamp. Yeah, it makes you question if Kermit's whole backstory is really the whole truth.
Datchia, we know what baby Kermit looks like. We know. We've seen him. We've seen baby Kermit. We've seen baby Kermit. We've seen Kermit's nephew. Does Robin the fucking Frog look like he could pass as a human child? Does he?
And look, I know that there's an entire film from 2002 dedicated to Kermit's backstory, but honestly, I would chalk that up to Muppet propaganda, trying to convince us that Kermit really did grow up in a swamp and wasn't abandoned out there when someone realised he wasn't their human child.
First off, you can't just chalk everything that doesn't go with your theory up to Muppet propaganda. That's not how that works. I can chalk up your entire theory to anti-Muppet propaganda made by anti-Muppet rights activists to take away the Muppets' well-earned fucking rights. We know what baby Kermit looks like. We know. We've seen him. We've seen baby Kermit. We've seen baby Kermit. We've seen Kermit's nephew. Does Robin the fucking Frog look like he could pass as a human child? Does he?
And now he spends his life trying to get back into the good graces of humanity by being a spectacle, a singing, talking frog. The earlier Muppets got the short end of the stick, choosing to mimic the animals that weren't on the top of the food chain.
Why would it be a choice? Also, didn't you just say that Kermit's supposed to be a human child who's also a frog for some reason? What?
But they still made it work. Those traits allowed them to excel in the entertainment world, and that's why you have the other, more human-passing Muppets who tend to stay out of the spotlight, because they know better than to draw attention to their differences. Then you add on the fact that they're also immortal.
There's a whole Muppets wiki page for characters in the Muppets who died, Datchia. They are not immortal, by any means. You just made that up.
And they don't age.
In the Muppets 2015 episode 14 Little Green Lie, on minute 2 and I believe 10 seconds, Robin says that his doctor told him you can still go through a growth spurt in your 30s. Meaning, the Muppets do age, however, they age unusually. And doctors might not have the resources to support their unusual aging habits.
So could it be that this effort to conform to this human-built society is so they don't get casted out?
They are casted out. You just said that. The fuck you mean? They are casted out. It's probably so they don't get murdered, dude. If anything. It's probably because it is completely legal to kill Muppets, as we know, because Miss Piggy was born on the Bush's table, and because there are several mentions of barbecue around her, and also because of frog legs, right? Frog legs barbecued from the Muppet movie. Killing Muppets is probably legal. So if they are mimicking, it is not so they don't get casted out, it is so they don't get murdered in the street.
The Muppets are notorious for causing chaos and ruin wherever they go.
So are humans, Datchia. That's kind of our thing. And unlike the Muppets, our chaos is completely on purpose.
It's possible that the attempts to stay relevant and stay in the humans' good graces is so they aren't written off as the monsters that they were seen as before. It's so they aren't abandoned once again. The question is, how long is it gonna take until you start asking yourself, is that a man or is it a Muppet?
What? That feels like a reference for reference's sake. I don't think that really makes sense with what you were saying prior. Like, do you mean, like, when will the Muppets evolve to a point where you can't tell them apart from people? I mean, I guess it's possible.
But what do you guys think? Are we on something here?
Nope. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!